Hi, Filmzii recap here. Today, I'm gonna explain a movie called Alternative Math. Watch out, spoilers ahead. This is a movie about Mrs. Wells, who is a math teacher. She works in an elementary school and has a student called Danny. One day, she asks Danny to come to the class and talks about his last math exam, which he actually failed. Danny, who seems ticked off, comes to the class and talks to the teacher. He seems to have problems in addition. Mrs. Wells tries to explain why his answers are not correct. 2 plus 2 equals 4, not 22. But Danny does not accept and gets angry, not because of doing bad at math, but because of all the red marking in F on his answer sheet. Mrs. Wells, who is a very good teacher, keeps calm and explains and explains and explains. She believes it's totally okay to have problems with addition, especially for kids of his age. As she explains, he becomes angrier and angrier. Danny insists on his idea, although the patient teacher does not lose her temper and explains again why his answers cannot be correct. 2 plus 2 means you have to add 2 plus 2, not just putting the numbers next to each other and writing 22. But Danny makes fun of the teacher's way and says this is stupid. Mrs. Wells does not give up. She tries another practical way. She shows Danny two markers in one hand and two other markers on the other hand and asks him how many markers he sees. Danny becomes mad and throws the box on the floor and leaves the class. The teacher keeps quiet and waits for the next day to see Danny's parents. Next day, Danny's parents come to the school and they start complaining. Mrs. Wells asks them to sit and not to worry about anything, since being confused with subjects like math is so normal, especially for kids who are the same age like Danny. Danny's mother does not seem grateful. She's a little bit rude too. She asks the teacher to explain why his son's answers were all incorrect. Mrs. Wells starts explaining what the test was about and why Danny's answers were all incorrect. But the mother asked her to prove why 2 plus 2 does not equal 22. The teacher, who is shocked, tries to explain this is not how math works. However, it seems impossible to convince them. She is also accused of behaving like Nazis and forcing everybody to believe what she believes in. Mrs. Wells, who is really confused, asks them to answer what 2 plus 2 equals, but they cannot answer. Instead, they insult her and Danny's father mocks her accent. Mrs. Wells, who is sick and tired of parents' behavior, shows them the door and cannot continue the discussion. But the mother says they will complain to the principal. She threatens the teacher to kick her out of school. She also calls her a bitch. Mrs. Wells sarcastically shames them for not being able to count, but the angry mom slaps the teacher on the face and leaves the room. The next day, principal comes to Mrs. Wells' class to talk to her. They have a discussion. The principal believes it was all Mrs. Wells' fault, so she has to apologize to Danny and Danny's parents. It's like the principal has a problem with the answer of 2 plus 2. Mrs. Wells says it's a part of her job to give students feedback, although the principal does not accept. The teacher is really stunned and says there is no biased view and mathematics is all factual, even though principal believes she has no respect for kids. Later, we see that parents protest against Mrs. Wells and believe she has undermined their kids' confidence. Some of them even ask her to apologize to parents. To make the matter worse, some of them claim that she hates children. The situation was getting worse and worse. Consequently, school made a decision of having a meeting with her. The superintendent of the school and his council said, and Mrs. Wells enters. She seemed somehow nervous, but can handle it. She asks the board of men to wait and give her a little time, but they refused and said because of hurting children's emotion and parents are going to sue the school. So no time is given to her. She couldn't believe what was happening. She tried to defend herself and said 2 plus 2 equals 4. This shouldn't have caused this much trouble. But they rejected this and said she should accept the possibility of multiple correct answer. She was thinking the world has changed. Every answer must be true then, or at least they can debate about it. Finally, they decided to suspend her till she reconsiders her extremist views. The day after, she went to school to pack her stuff. When she arrived home, she turned on TV and saw most of the channels were having a debate with political leaders of the world to find an answer. They exaggerated the situation and spread the rumor that she cannot keep her student in the class more than a year. She was thinking, isn't this the graduation? While she was watching TV, she received a call from school. They told her she was officially fired. For the last time, she went to school for the paperwork. Unbelievably, there were some reporters waiting for her. They were invited from the principal, and the principal wanted to prove the school does not support Mrs. Wells' extremist views. Before the paperwork, the principal wanted to pay her monthly salary. He said her last 2-term salary is $2,000. Mrs. Wells said it is actually $22,000. The principal is awkwardly looking toward the cameras, and the movie ended this way.